My name is Joseph Nagy. I am the Shattuck Professor of Irish Studies here in the Department of Celtic Languages and Literatures here at Harvard, where I'm also the chair of the department. The course we're talking about is actually not quite connected to my Celtic aspects. It's a general education course. It's $11.95. We titled it Eating Culture, Past, Present, and Future. And it is a course that has grown out of my long-term interest in food, in what we humans do with food, what human communities have made of food, how food is both a kind of glue that brings us together, but it can also sometimes be a source of contention and of course, great stress and difficulty in finding food. I'm also very much involved in folklore and mythology studies, which is offered here at Harvard as an undergraduate concentration. And probably most of what I have to say about food comes from my folkloristic interests in looking at how traditions evolve around food, about the preparation of food, about the distribution of food, about how to eat together. And all of this plugs into a more general consideration of what we mean by culture and also what we mean by aesthetics, because in fact this course qualifies for the aesthetics and culture requirement within the Gen Ed program. Anyway, it's been great fun doing the course, and I look forward to doing it again in the spring of 2026. We had very good enrollment for a first-time course. We had over 200 students, and they stuck with us till the end, and they were a delight to teach. I must say that if nothing else, this course demonstrated to me something that I've long suspected, that food and the discussion of food are the great icebreakers in social connections. That if you start talking about food with a person, whether it be a student or someone who's not a student, the conversation blossoms. And there are ways in which certain defenses that we typically have in place if we're talking with someone that we don't know are not there, and that people can feel much freer about talking about food than they can be talking about more controversial topics like politics or religion or lifestyle or that sort of thing. So anyway, I've had some wonderful conversations with our students here at Harvard, and they seem to be enjoying themselves, and they seem to be enjoying exploring these various topics having to do with food. They also came from a remarkable range of backgrounds. So I have had terrific conversations with students who have come and talked with me about the food traditions from the various places where they or their ancestors came from. So, for example, we've had students from Uruguay, we've had students from Burma, we've had students from Turkey, we've had students from various East Asian cultures. We've also had students from various parts of this country, so that we've had the chance to talk about local food traditions. We've also had great conversations with people who are from this immediate area, and also, of course, the students who have been here for a year or more, and talking about the kinds of eating situations that we've encountered here. Harvard students typically live in houses, and they are basically dependent upon the food that they receive in the cafeterias. And actually talking about the cafeteria food has also been fun. A good deal of praise, but also some criticism and some constructive suggestions about all that. One thing that we developed as a tradition within our course is that I would try to bring in some food for every lecture that was relevant to what we were talking about. So for example, when we were discussing tofu and talking about how soybean products are a very important part of the food traditions of really now many parts of the world, so it's become a global kind of food. But of course we associate it primarily with East Asia, with China, with Chinese tradition, with Japanese tradition, with more Southern Asian tradition. So we brought in some tofu, and enough for the typical number of people who would be willing in our large classroom to come down and to sample what we had brought for the day. And it was fun, and for the tofu, but also for the various other foods we brought in. It was rare that there was anything left over. So that was also encouraging that people liked what we brought in to sample. One thing we brought in to sample that was somewhat controversial were these candies that were made with the fruit known as durian, Durian. Durian is a great big fruit grown in southern parts of Asia. It is many consider an acquired taste because the smell of it is quite pungent, and in fact the smell of durian fruit reminds some people of something that's gone bad. But the actual fruit itself, the flesh of the fruit, is not quite as off-putting, though that too has been sometimes a source of disagreement among people. It is a great favorite among people from Southern Asian cultures, including Southern China. And I thought that if we brought it in its candy form, it would be something perhaps less controversial for people to try, because most people in the class had never tasted durian. But it turned out that some people could even pick up on that scent of durian from the candy itself, even though the candy also contained coconut and various other ingredients. And there were some cases where people said they just absolutely hated it and couldn't finish chewing the candy. Other people who said, tasted fine. I'm not quite sure what the controversy is all about. But it was a chance for people to find out that taste is something that varies from culture to culture, and to explore notions such as the acquired taste. So for example, if something is an acquired taste, why do we acquire it? We read some wonderful work written by anthropologists and paleontologists, people who have studied early humanity and how humanity evolved, that emphasizes, and this is perhaps a newer trend in these fields, that emphasizes that taste and liking the taste of a food is a very important factor in what people will eat and what people will seek out, or what people will actually grow or make happen for them. That might seem like a very obvious point, but in fact, a lot of the scholarship about food and about the human search for food has oftentimes ignored the fact that we're willing to go that extra mile for something that appeals to us, something that excites our taste buds and gets us interested. Something else that we explored is the way that some foods that become very popular are foods that in some ways, given our evolution and given what our bodies and our taste buds and our mouths might be telling us, it shouldn't be favorite foods, but they become favorite foods. Why, for example, in many cultures and among many people, do some of us like to eat hot foods that seemingly give that impression of burning our mouths? Why does that intrigue us? Why does that fascinate us? It's a kind of voluntary masochism, but it gives people a thrill. And again, talk about acquired taste. It's not something that you would right away be attracted to. Another example is actually a lot of foods that are sour in flavor, because it would seem that foods that are sour or that strike our taste buds as being sour, that's a kind of warning that the food might have gone bad or that there might be some danger involved. Similarly with something that's bitter. Bitterness also can be read as a kind of warning signal sent by our taste buds and sent by our bodies, in effect, that be careful about eating this because it might be something poisonous. But we all know of instances where people enjoy something which is bitter. So, for example, beer that has hops in it. Hops being a plant, which in fact gives beer a certain bitter taste, but it's become very popular. Beers didn't always contain that kind of ingredient, but now in fact most beers do have that certain bitterness to them. And we can think of other foods that similarly are bitter, or foods that are sour, and yet we like that. And sometimes we like the sour in conjunction with the sweet. This is something else that seemingly human culture has developed, and it's not necessarily something that you find in other animal species, but the combination of, for example, salty and sweet, which sometimes becomes very popular in our human foodways. So I'm thinking here, for example, salted caramel, which is still, I think, something quite popular. Human beings like to combine their foods and like to combine the various taste sensations that food brings about. Again, this is not something which you find in the animal world. Now, all generalizations are false, so of course we can always come up with exceptions. But humans combine their foods. Humans, when they find food, they tend to take it home with them and oftentimes share it. And again, that's not something which is necessarily typical of the animal world. Humans also realize that, well, some of this food is probably more than I can consume or my community can consume right now, but we should probably keep it for a later time when food might not be as available. And so humans have developed these fascinating ways of preserving food. And again, this is something which is distinctive of the human species. And if you simply choose as a topic the ways in which humans have developed to preserve food, that could be a course in itself. And the absolutely fascinating topic, and the ingenuity of human beings in the course of millennia in coming up with ways to preserve food is a wonder to behold, using, allowing the food to actually, so to speak, go bad, or to ferment, or to develop a kind of different stage of their being. So we think of things like cheese, for example, or we think of something like tofu, getting back to a soybean product. Of course, something like soy sauce, and also tofu, as it's oftentimes consumed, has been allowed to age. And in fact, if you take a look at the Chinese word tofu, to means bean, and fu means something which is processed, something which has come to a certain stage, or even rotten. So there in the very name of tofu itself, we have that notion of the potential of taking fresh tofu and of letting it sit around for a while, or of marinating it with some other ingredients and then seeing what happens. There's a restaurant just down the street, for example, here, Chinese restaurant, which serves what is called on the menu, and I believe it's an accurate translation of the Chinese, stinky tofu. And it's one of those challenge foods that if you go to that restaurant, you can invite your guests to try, because it is fermented tofu, and it certainly packs a wallop compared to the tofu that we might eat in a more fresh form. There's also smoking food. We see that with meats and with fish. Also salt. Salt has been a very, very important way of preserving food. And again, that saltiness also contributes to the flavor of the food, as does the smoke. Various kinds of fascinating procedures. And also the fact that we've developed a taste for these kinds of preserved foods that, again, might originally, we might have been warned about by our bodies and by our taste buds, but that we realize in the course of time that it's okay, or that for the most part it's okay. You also have to wonder about the history of humanity, about how many people have sacrificed their lives in the course of the experimentation that must have taken place with preservation of food. But getting beyond that, so because eating is actually in the title of the course, we also discuss commensality, about sharing a table together or sharing an eating experience together with other people, and how we as human beings react in that kind of situation. For many people, it's very important that in addition to sharing the food, in addition to having the pleasure of eating the food, that we also carry on a conversation. And it's been argued, in fact, that that conversation is in many cultures almost an essential part of the process of eating. There are some cultures, however, where there's the sense that when you're eating, you should be concentrating on the eating and not talk as much. In fact, I am of Hungarian extraction, and I remember a saying that I used to hear in my childhood about how Hungarians don't talk while they eat. And I haven't actually seen that borne out in meals I've had with Hungarians, but it seems to be something that perhaps is at least a kind of ideal that's embedded in the culture. So looking at food, looking at the eating of food, looking at the sharing of food, looking at what we do food, how we prepare food, all that is really a subset of human culture, and in some ways is a microcosm of the macrocosm, and that's also a point we're making. And I have to say that the teaching fellows that I was lucky enough to meet and to hire and to work with in this course have been spectacular. They've come up with so many clever things for their sections to do, and they've actually found kitchens around the Harvard campus which are available for various kinds of experiments in the kitchen. And the students have loved these opportunities to cook for each other, to share food with each other, and to study themselves, and to study these kinds of situations and how we react to food. Another point I would make is that there are so many other members of the faculty here at Harvard, not just in the Faculty of Arts and Science, but also over in the Public Health School, also in the Medical School, in the Law School, who have worked extensively on food-related issues, and food-related issues also having to do with the future, and about things like genetically altered foods, or how in the world are we going to continue to feed a human population, much of which is still starving today. And it would be wonderful to bring these various faculty together in a more organized way, and maybe, just maybe, to start something that was started at my previous place of employment, which is some kind of a food studies program. Whether it be a concentration or a secondary field is something to be determined, but we've got lots of talent and lots of knowledge here at Harvard. And in my previous experiences, I don't think I've ever been involved in an interdisciplinary field where I've learned as much from my colleagues as I have in studying food and in finding out about my colleagues' work and listening to them and reading their work and sharing whatever I know with them. So, and I think it would be a very popular field for our students to be engaged in. So that's something that I'd like to explore the possibility of in the future.